Vincent. Yes, welcome to another edition of Footprints by Operator Radio. We're live right now in Warm Rotterdam, and accompanied to me next is Ngoni Egan, the producer of the hour. Welcome, glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks, Emil, for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no problem at all. So, for the persons that don't know or aren't familiar with the concept, Footprints by Operator Radio is an ongoing web show where we do a deep dive into music production. We invite a different producer every edition, and it's possible to ask your questions via the website of Operator Radio, live stream too, and the show will be presented on YouTube later on the website. So yeah, Ngoni, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So could you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm Ngoni Egan. Yeah, I'm a producer and DJ. I'm from Dublin. Moved to the Netherlands 2 years ago. Yeah, I've been in the music industry, DJing for 10 years, producing for a little bit longer. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Good to hear. And I see you brought some stuff with you.
Yeah, I brought some bits from my studio at home. So I just brought like a drum machine. This one here is the Electron analog rhythm. This one is like a analog drum machine, but it also has sampling capabilities. So yeah, it's a analog drum synthesizer and yeah, sampler as well at the same time. This is probably like my favorite drum machine. I like, all the different possibilities and capabilities of different things you can do with it. Then also this one is also from Electron. It's the Electron analog keys. So this one is just like, yeah, an analog synthesizer. And yeah, this one also has sampling capabilities, and there's an awful lot of, yeah, there's an awful lot of menu diving in these machines. They're a little bit like, at first they seemed complicated to use, but the longer I kind of hung on to them, yeah, the more fun I have with them. And this machine here is my modular. I started building this, I think it was about 5 years ago now.
Wait,
yeah.
you built it yourself?
No, I didn't build it myself. Well, I bought the case, and yeah, I had a smaller case initially. There's a producer from Dublin called Defect. He's like an electro producer, and yeah, I used to go to a lot of his gigs when I was younger, and then he had like a massive studio in Dublin with, a lot of modular, a lot of different drum machines and stuff. And yeah, at the time when I became friends with Defect, I was yeah, had a couple of like desktop synthesizers and drum machines, and then he had like a lot of modular, and then I didn't want to get into modular because at the time I was like, oh, I just want to finish music. I don't want to,
It seems very difficult and very big to start with modular synthesizer.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's, when you look at someone's modular setup, like in a club, for me, like one of the things that really drew me into using hardware was just going to gigs and seeing like, yeah, different producers doing live sets. And yeah, when I look at some people's setup, like initially when I looked at some producers' setups with modular, I was like, oh, well, I'd love to have that. Then I looked at the price and I was just like, looked at the amount of effort, certain like terms like, HP and, the pitch. And yeah, there's a lot of, it's very different modular to, yeah, regular drum machines and synthesizers. So I didn't want to get into it. And then I told my friend, Matt, Defect, I told him, no, I don't want to get into it. And then he was selling a tiny case. And then he also had like one module here, this module. And he was like, oh, I can just give you this really small case and, this really small module. And then,
And eventually it went bigger and bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
And more
Yeah.
and more.
Yeah, it didn't take long. I think it was about this within the space of a year. I kind of had this one finished and I haven't added anything else onto it. I just mainly use it for the synthesizers. There's 3 synthesizers in it. So yeah, that's the main reason why I use it. There's not too much like effects or anything else in there, just mostly just for the synthesis. But that's the beauty of modular as well, that, there's so many different, avenues you can go down. Yeah.
Okay, nice. I think we're gonna hear something, the sound that comes out of it in
Yeah.
later today, because if I believe correctly, you also brought along 2 tracks of yourself.
Yes, I did. I brought along 2 tracks with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good idea to start with 1 track, and then you could tell something about what was the way that you produced the track, or how did you arrange it, and tell something about the effects you put into it.
Yeah.
Would be great.
Cool. So the track I'm gonna show everyone is A Compute B Program. This is a track I made in my old studio in Dublin. I think it was around 3.5 years ago now. Yeah, and I've noticed like over the years how my production kind of changes. When I open this up now, I think it's quite a lot more like a primitive version of what I used to produce. Sound-wise, it sounds the same, but it's just the process that I use to make it. When I actually look at the file and I look at the different components in the file, I can see like all the time my music production changes. But yeah, I'll play the track now.
Yes, yes, nice track, man.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah.
Really loving the electro vibe and the voices in between, and yeah, dope, really dope.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with a bit of vocoder.
Exactly. Did you set it yourself, the vocoder,
Yeah,
or?
yeah. So this track, yeah, I was saying earlier, my production, the way I produced, yeah, 3 years ago, was a little bit different. I feel like every year, you know, sometimes if I'm collaborating with people, you know, I might learn something from, yeah, one of my friends who I'm collaborating with, or just messing around in the studio, and then I pick stuff up, and I think it's the same for yeah, a lot of people, you know, who have been around in music. I kind of pick things up here and there. So yeah, back then. This track was just I was producing mostly completely with hardware and then just recording, and then I was tweaking the EQs on my mixing desk. Normally in my home studio, I have all the machines going into yeah my mixer. Um, but yeah, I stopped mixing. Like I still sometimes mix on my mixer, but most of the EQing now I just do in Ableton. So yeah, back then I'll show you. I can solo like different parts of this track. So I'll solo the kick. So all you guys are going to hear now is the kick. So this kick, yeah, this kick is actually just like a. I recorded it on this drum machine here, and I just recorded it as you can see here, just down the bottom part. Yeah, I just like keyed in a couple of steps and recorded it like this. A lot of the time, yeah, for my production with electro, um, generally I'll start off with the kick, and then I'll see how the kick sounds with the snare. Because sometimes, yeah, I feel like with electro, there's only kind of a certain way the steps can kind of go um, with the snare, and then if it fits with the snare, that's kind of when I'll use that as the kind of like basis of my track. So I'll solo the kick and the snare now, and I'll show you what that sounds like. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so nice one. Yeah, so this is kind of like yeah, quite a yeah the basis of generally how I start a lot of my tracks. Sometimes I start with yeah a bass line. This one actually, sorry, this one I did start off with the bass line first, and then I just yeah keyed in some steps into the drum machine and just had the snare hitting the 5 and the 13. Yeah, on the sequencer. So there's always 16 steps usually on a sequencer. That's like yeah, kind of the basic way a lot of drum machines and synthesizers come. So yeah, on the 5th and the 13th, I generally have my snares there. But with this snare, I actually used a sample. I think that was probably the only thing that I used that was a sample for this track. And then I'll just show you how, yeah, how I did that. So yeah, this is the snare here. And then generally, I like to have a lot of, the way I make music, I generally work in blocks of 16, 32, or 64 steps. And generally for snares, and just so snares won't sound monotonous, because a lot of the time I find if I have snares just hitting the 5 and the 13, it's just going to sound boring. But generally, on the last 16 steps of 4 bars, generally I double up, so it sounds something like this. So you'll see now it's about to hit the last phrase. So generally I double up the snares, and then I just add a reverb. So you can see here where the reverb is hitting. So you can see here, they're the steps. So it's the first 16 bars, 32, and then all the way to 64. But the last two is just a small bit of reverb. And the reverb isn't hitting completely the last two steps. So the reverb is only kind of hitting, like, I'll play this part. So it's coming in for the first bit of the snare, and then it's being quickly brought down, which for me, I feel like it gives a nice effect, and it kind of gives the track a little bit of feeling of like movement and intensity. Then the next part I will show you is the bass line. So this bass line, I used it from a synthesizer which I didn't bring with me today. It's the Korg MS2000. So basically I just sent out a sequence out to the synth, and I just had an arpeggiator on it, which was hooked to 16th. So this is what the arpeggiator sounds like. An arpeggiator just basically repeats and plays the beginning part of a sample or the beginning part of a sound. Yeah, in this case, the beginning part of a sound, which is just being repeated over and over again. And the way the track works is it's quite a simple sequence. So it's just like a higher note and then a lower note, and it sounds like this. So it's this being repeated over and over again, but generally I'll switch over to this view. So generally, yeah, I record in session view. So this is how the sequence looks for the bass line. I recorded 4 times, and the reason I recorded 4 times, generally when I record like one part of a sequence, I will open up a filter or a resonance, or I may open up like some sort of effect for one of the recordings that I do, and the next one I will open up yeah, other parameters then on the synthesizer. So the first part of the bass line just sounds like this. It's pretty basic and it's pretty static. And then the next part, I opened up the filter, and then I also opened up a bit of resonance, and I was tweaking them at the same time, which is nice because it kind of gives the track a little bit more movement. So yeah, like I said, with the snare, having for the last bit of the snare, having a yeah, reverb on the last 2 steps gave the snare a little bit of movement. And then also with the bass line, rather than having the bass line being static, yeah, I just moved around the filters. Yeah, and then the next part was just a simple synth sound. So yeah, with this track, when I recorded it, it was actually, yeah, I'll just go through a little bit of the signal flow, which I use when I'm producing. So I just have, yeah, a rack with all my drum machines and synthesizers there. And then from there on, the audio goes into my mixer, and then the audio comes out of the mixer through 2 XLRs, and it goes into my sound card here, this red box in the back. And from there on, I just record in Ableton. Yeah, when I made this track, I was really trying to do as much as possible outside of Ableton first, and then being happy with my sounds before I recorded within Ableton. And then, yeah, with this track, it kind of surprises me, even like, you know, if I open up, let's say, an even older track, there mightn't be EQing in it at all. yeah, and in this track, like, you know, the way when I look at it now, I think like, wow, you know, I used very little audio effects back then. But yeah, the quality doesn't sound, yeah, to me, it doesn't sound any better or any worse than, you know, music I'm making, yeah, music I've made recently. Yeah, which I feel kind of goes to show that like it doesn't really matter, you know, what way you make music, whether you rely on Ableton mainly or whether you rely on drum machines and synthesizers. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. But with this, there was actually very little audio effects. I use a lot more audio effects now these days. So yeah, with this, I just use some EQing, and the whole idea of the EQing here. Yeah, so this is just like a synth line. It's just like a background synth line. Um, so with this, there was some low end in it, I believe. I'll just take one of these out. Yeah, there's actually not too much low end, but I just put the EQ there just in case. Yeah, so basically with EQing, for me, I like to keep like my kick. Yeah, obviously kicks are going to be in this range, in the lower frequency range, and then yeah, my synth sounds I generally like to have them in the center, and then my hi hats and the more higher pitch sounds I have here. So with this sound, I didn't want this sound interfering too much with my kick drum and my bass line. So I just cut everything off here, which is something I generally do with a lot of my production. I just yeah, EQ a lot. Um, yeah, and it just kind of helps the track sound less muddy. But one thing I have learned over the past few years is with EQing, it can kind of go too far, and then tracks can sound if there's too much EQing done unnecessarily on a track, which is something I've done before in the past. That can just kind of lead to a track sounding less, yeah, less lively. Sounds like there's a little bit less life. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with, you know, track sounding a little bit rough. But yeah, my preference generally when I produce is to, yeah, EQ any sounds that I don't need. And yeah, one of the main reasons is I was taught to do that initially. But yeah, another reason is, for example, I recorded, I think, how many? Yeah, I think I recorded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll say almost 12 sounds in this track. So if I didn't EQ all those 12 sounds, what would have happened would be there would have been low frequency ranges and very high frequency ranges, and there's some frequency ranges which yeah, as human beings we can't hear, and you know, you won't hear when you're producing, you know, in your studio, you know, with yeah, the average kind of studio speakers. But when you're in a club and you have yeah, bigger speakers, any sounds that aren't EQ'd or filtered, when you have, let's say, a track like this with 12 sounds, what can end up happening is any sounds that aren't filtered, a small low end sound, which is unnecessary from, let's say, a couple of different synth sounds or yeah, other effect sounds, all of those summed up can, when you're in a club and you hear a track in a club system, can make a track sound a little bit muddy. But of course, there's no real wrong or right way to do it, because yeah, with music, it's all about yeah, it's to do with the listener and whatever the listener likes or whatever the listener is drawn to. So yeah, there's no real wrong or right way to do it. But for me, the main thing that I like to do is just yeah, try not to have frequencies clashing too much, but also try not to EQ too much, because that will make a track sound a little bit dead. So yeah, and then I'll just show you guys some other sounds in this track. So this one is another sound which I got from the Korg MS2000. And this sound is also using an arpeggiator. I think I could have used the same arpeggiator. Or is it an arpeggiator? Yeah, no, I used an arpeggiator in this sound. And then you can see here, I just did some automation. So basically, I'm just opening up the EQ on this sound. So you can see as it comes in. I'll just bring it back. So you can see this part here, this red line. This is just some automation, and I hooked the automation to the frequency. So I'll just play the track from the beginning, and then you'll see how the low end and the mid range is really cut off in the beginning, so the sound can creep in. And I'll show you here. You can see here how it travels across, and it kind of lets the sound creep in a little bit. And I think what my thinking was at the time was just to, introduce this sound slowly. So we'll see what this sounds like just from a little bit before that sound, and then see what happens when the sound comes in. And then, if you keep your eyes on the EQ down at this lower part. The reason why I did this was just so as I said before, just so the sound would be gradually eased in. Sometimes it's nice to, whenever I introduce new sounds in a track, I always like to, either let them build in slowly, or take away another sound and then bring the other sound back when the new sound comes in. But yeah, let's have a look at this. Yeah, so that's what was happening there. And then here, there's a lead sound. Yeah, so far, besides the snare, all of these sounds were just gotten from machines. So this is actually quite like a rough jam. That's what I kind of describe it as. A lot of the time when I make music, I just jam in the studio first. And then when I like, where a jam is going, then I decide to record certain elements of the jam. And then also, I think when I made this track, I made it quickly enough. But the pace of, how I make music really varies. Sometimes, it can take me, sometimes I could make an EP, in the space of a month. Other times, it might take a lot longer than that. So it really depends, and I can't really, describe, the reason for it, why sometimes, I can make music quickly and other times I make music less quickly. But yeah, let's dive back into this sound. So with this sound, it was actually pretty funny. I'll just switch mics. Yeah, so with that sound, it was pretty funny how I made that. What I actually wanted to do is I wanted to record my voice because the synthesizer I was using has a vocoder on it. And what ended up happening was so there was a setting on it which I didn't realize, and my voice triggered this sound. So when I started speaking, it just triggered this sound. And then I just started screaming at this part here. So this part, that's why it's like kind of constant. So I was just like shouting into a microphone. I was trying to like say a couple of words which I'd written down. And then, this sound came in, and then I was like, oh, I like the sound of that. So I just kept it in the track. But what it was an arpeggiator in the synthesizer. Hooked up to a patch, and then my voice was triggering it. Then, and I think my voice was just triggering the intensity of this sound coming in and out. And I just kept it. And as I described before, I was quite conscious of the EQing down at this part here. So because this this sound, it's not like a bass line sound. It's not, you know, its purpose isn't to, its purpose isn't, it's not there to give bass, or it's not there to give too much high end. So I just cut it. Generally, when I EQ, I'll just give an example. I'll loop this part. So I'll show you what I mean with EQ. So this is the sound with no EQ set. And then this is the sound with the EQ set. You can hear it's just like a little bit more high pitch when I bring the EQ in and take it off. But as I said, yeah, generally with EQing, I try not to do too much, because I feel like, you know, for example, if I was to EQ this all the way this way, it wouldn't give the track the same feeling. So I'll just show you an example. So you can barely hear the sound now. So, you know, that's the danger with EQing. Like, EQing too much can just really, it can really take the impact of sound away. So this sound, it sounds a lot better like this. And then, yeah, this is one of the last parts actually. I can show you. Yeah, so this was the vocals, which I was actually trying to record in this part here just beforehand, which didn't work. Yeah. For electro production and just production in general, I really like using vocoders. I feel like, adding my voice and then kind of, editing it down, really, it just gives the track like a different feeling, and it gives the track a bit more of a feeling of, it just gives it a bit more life. And then I'll unsolo it. Yeah, so the rest of the sounds is just like the hi-hats, and like I said before, EQing, yeah. Yeah, so generally with the high-pitched sounds, I generally like to cut those off, because the thing about like our ears as humans, is like we can't hear, like generally adults can't hear under 20 hertz, and we can only hear up to about, I think it's is it 18,000? Yeah, generally about like 18,000-ish, and anything just kind of over 18,000, we can't really hear. Young kids can hear lower frequencies and higher pitch frequencies better than we can, because as you get older, you're not able to hear. Basically your hearing just deteriorates as you get older. So in my production, I'm always conscious of like, okay, there's a bunch of frequencies here which, you know, people aren't going to be able to hear at all, and there is the chance that people may hear them in a club when the track's being played in a club sound system, and these frequencies are doubled up. If I don't take them away, they can be doubled up. For me, my preference is just to take them away. Then, you can see here it's the same with the rim shot. And with this effect sound, I didn't actually have any EQing on it. So this is just, an effect sound. when I was playing the track back for you, I actually didn't. There was a part which I didn't play, which I actually got from a machine I have at home, the Yamaha RMX 2000. There was a pattern in it, which I'll activate it now. Yeah, originally when I made the track, I added this in and I liked it at the time, and then I listened back to it, and then I just realized, yeah, I didn't like it anymore, so I left it out of the track. But yeah, with a lot of my production, generally, I'll just keep on recording bits in, and when I like, you know, how a track sounds at the beginning, I'll just keep on recording different things and taking them away, and then adding them back in and taking things away. Yeah, so a lot of the time, yeah, I can have one idea and a track can sound completely different, and then, yeah, when I get down to the arrangement part, I start taking bits away or adding things in. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the basis of this track, and the next track I'll show you, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's gonna have a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more audio effects and a little bit more going on in Ableton compared to, yeah, this track.
Thank you, Ngoni. It was really nice seeing you work, and I really like your straightforward way of thinking and processing the track. So thank you for explaining to us.
Yeah, cheers.
So I'm gonna pay my attention to the audience. Do you have any questions about the track, about his way of making music? Yeah.
Yes, yes, now it's working. Here you go.
Hello. I was wondering, when you're mixing down your track, are you doing anything about the stereo image, or are you keeping everything mono mostly?
I'm keeping everything, generally with the bass line, I like to keep the bass line mono, and then, yeah, everything else is pretty much stereo. Yeah. But at the same time, there's certain things that affect, yeah, whether sounds are mono or stereo. Yeah, for example, some of the outputs will just have like mono left and right, and then you'll have like the stereo out. And then on some of these machines, like on this machine here, I can pan in the machine, but the panning will only really have an effect if I have the output coming from, yeah, this headphone out. And yeah, it really depends. Yeah, it really depends, because like, yeah, it's been recorded out from this machine, and I can do some panning here, and then also by the time it hits Ableton, I can also do panning on my mixing desk. So yeah, the sound can kind of like look a little bit different. It's never truly, yeah, it's never truly like a specific stereo sound. But generally with bass lines, I can show you here. Here in this bass line, I actually didn't. This is just completely stereo, but sometimes I add in a. I'll show you this tool. Go to audio effects, utilities, bass mono. Sometimes I use this just to make the bass mono. This is just one of the stock. Yeah, one of the stock effects in Ableton. So sometimes I use this, but yeah, back then I wasn't really too conscious of yeah, sounds being stereo or mono, whereas nowadays I'm kind of a lot more conscious. But yeah, I hope that's
Yeah, thanks.
that's
And
answered your
cool
question.
track.
Cheers,
Really like
thanks
it.
a lot.
Are there questions? No? Yes? No? Okay.
One more.
So, you said you like working in the session view.
Yeah.
Do you also record your arrangement from the session view, or do you arrange from the arrangement view, so to say?
Yeah. So yeah, generally I will record like a couple of steps, probably like generally 64, sometimes more. I'll show you an example is here with this bass line as I described earlier on. The way I wanted to record it was to record it in like blocks. So the first block here is just when the sound is there's not too much added or taken away from this bass sound. And then in this second part, the way I recorded it was, yeah, basically I recorded it a lot more, but I tweaked the filters. So you'll hear the filter opening up. You'll hear some resonance as well, kind of spill over. And then, so I recorded this much in the session view. And then there's also another bit here. So generally, like the way I like to record is small bits in session view, but I like to have like the basic part in the beginning when the track starts, and then the more kind of like intensities and tweaking, I kind of gradually change. And then when I bring it to the arrangement view then, okay, let's have a look at this. Yeah, so when I bring it to arrangement view then, yeah, I kind of use a mixture of both to answer your question. So when I bring it to arrangement view, I drag through. So I will drag this sound over like this. You can just drag it like anywhere. I'll just drop it here. I'll cancel this. But yeah, so that's kind of how I drag it over. But I drag it obviously into this slot here where it belongs. And then yeah, I'll add like the second part where the intensity started gradually building. So yeah, that's kind of the way I'd record. Most of the time with bass lines, that's what I do. And yeah, with the kick as well, that's what I do. I just record in session view and then just like, yeah, drag over blocks of, that's actually one of the reasons I love, yeah, Ableton, is that, yeah, you can record in certain like small blocks and then you can drag it over and then you can just kind of create the track whatever way you want. But yeah, for me, I like to use a mixture of things. So I'll show you here with this pad sound. This was all recorded in one take. So it starts off very low. So yeah, I keyed in some MIDI on a MIDI keyboard I had, and then that went out to the Korg MS-2000 synthesizer. And then once I'd recorded it, I had the MIDI recorded, and then I played the MIDI over and over again. So basically the MIDI was playing, and then I was just then able to kind of like tweak the volume. I can't remember what else I tweaked with this sound, but I was able to just kind of tweak it. But I recorded this in last because I felt, yeah, the track really needed a little bit of, yeah, something else to kind of, yeah. It just needed another sound. Yeah, so with this sound, yeah, I just recorded in arrangement view. So to answer your question, I kind of use a mixture depending on, yeah, depending on what kind of fits. Yeah, I generally just use a mixture of different things. If it's easier to record in session view and then drag it out and then duplicate the what I've recorded, sometimes I do that, and then sometimes I just record, yeah, just in arrangement view when most of the tracks have already been arranged. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
I have actually a question about that specific sound.
Of course you have.
The pad one. Why did you choose to to bring it in at the end of the track, like to make it sound like a kind of an outro or something? Because I think it really fits. You also could have chosen to bring it in earlier. It's more of a question like when it comes to the arrangement. Is it you make choices based on your feeling or based on how do you do usually the arrangement? I guess.
Yeah, so with this sound, yeah, specifically, because I had this chord sound, just give me a sec. I'm just going to drop the mic. I'm just going to solo 2 parts. Yeah, so the reason why I added this at the end was this kind of yeah, dubby kind of chord was playing for about, I think, almost like a minute or 2 minutes, I think. Yeah, a minute and a half, I think it was playing, and then I wanted to bring in the pad gradually, and yeah, later on then I just decided to actually take away the chord sound, and I never actually replaced it with anything. And when the track came out and it was released, funnily enough, like my mom listens to all my music, and she actually said, "Yeah, the track gets a little bit boring in the middle. You know, it sounds like, you know, there's something supposed to be there, but then you know, then it just disappeared. What happened?" So my mom actually noticed that, like, yeah, that I'd taken away sound, and then I never bothered like replacing it, and I didn't think anybody'd notice.
It's kind of a happy accident.
Yeah,
in that
true,
sense.
true. It's a happy accident. Yeah.
It is working. You always give your mom a listen to the music you made.
Yeah, yeah,
That's cool,
definitely.
man.
Yeah, she listens to a lot of my music. In the beginning, she was kind of like, you know, you need to kind of like, you know, start focusing on college, you know, like, and then she was always kind of like, yeah, stressing me out about, yeah, you need to focus on college, your career, you know, I know you like music, but like, you know, music's supposed to be a hobby, you know, and stuff like that. So in the beginning, she used to listen to some of my music. She just thought like, you know, because my mom likes making jewelry and she has her own hobbies and stuff like that. So she's like quite creative. But yeah, it was when I started kind of like releasing on labels and stuff like that, she really started yeah, listening back to my music, and she listens to all my mixes. She was like one of my top listeners on SoundCloud. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, but I think it's just, yeah, I didn't realize when I was younger that she was really creative. Yeah, she's just like really creative. She makes jewelry, she makes, you know, she paints, she does a bunch of different things. So maybe that's, you know, that might have had an influence on me being creative. But yeah, generally like I'll send her stuff. She kind of, yeah, she likes to keep
She
up
gives you
with
feedback. like-
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. Thanks for your answer.
Cool. Thanks for the question.
Okay, nice. Well, if there aren't any other questions, let's move along to the next part of the show. You brought another track with you?
Yeah, I brought another track. The track I brought is Chabaroni West Groove. So we go here. Should just
And is this track released or is it unreleased?
Yeah, this track is released. It was released on United Identities last summer. Yeah, so this track is more like, yeah, it's more like a techno-focused track. When I first started producing, like, they were taking production seriously like 10 years ago. I was producing a lot of dubby techno, but it was like much slower tempo, like I think like 110, 115, 120 BPM, like really slow dubby stuff. And then I was just purely doing electro for a while, and then yeah, for the United Identities release, I just decided, because I love messing around with dub sounds. Yeah, so I just decided yeah, to kind of make a dub techno track. But with this track, I'm gonna do something. So I'm actually like missing the sample, the dub chord sample that I made, but I think I will record a dub sound from this machine here, the Electron Analog Keys, and yeah, that'll just kind of give a better demonstration of yeah, how I make music, and yeah, I'll see how it goes.
A live set, basically.
Yeah, one part, yeah, live. Yeah, so yeah. Thanks, Frey. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I need to open up in Ableton. The way it works, I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with Ableton, but it doesn't really matter what digital audio workstation you use or whether you just use completely hardware. because yeah, these music softwares, they basically replicate what's in a music studio. Yeah, so I just need to open up an audio track here. So Command T, and then I'll open up another one here, Command T. So these two sounds here were originally like the dub sounds which I had. I'll actually play a bit of the track. Okay, just give me 1 sec. Okay, that's not playing for some reason. I think it's just to do with the connection, but yeah, I'll just I can play the beginning of the track from Ableton, and I'll play it like kind of for the first, I don't know, minute or two. It is missing the dub parts, and I will replace the dub parts. Yeah, so this is where the dub sound's supposed to come in. So yeah, let's replace this. So I've armed my tracks. And this is just like an actual stock patch, which comes from the analog keys. So I'm just going to tweak the patch and then try change it. Generally, like I like to, it's something I just have in my head. I don't really like, if I use a patch which is like which I haven't made myself, I generally like to change it around a little bit, because I'm always afraid, like I always think, oh, what if somebody has the same drum machine or synthesizer, at home, and when the track's released, then they realize like, oh, he's using, this stock patch from this machine. So I always try to like kind of switch things up if I do use a stock patch. So yeah, and I'm just gonna listen to the track and listen to kind of like the mood of the track, and then kind of decide whether I'd like it to be a little bit more lower pitch or higher pitch, or what way I'll go about it. Yeah, so yeah, I'm kind of getting a little bit lost in it, but yeah, so this is kind of what I like to do. I'd like to make a beat with the kick and the percussion, and then yeah, generally then I'll layer the synth sounds on top. So yeah, generally I just kind of have a jam and I mess around. I try and my idea now is just make a a repetitive dub stab sound. But generally I'll just keep on tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until I find until I have an aha moment where I'm like, oh yeah, this is this sounds like yeah, something I want. Yeah, so I'm just gonna keep tweaking. So I've just cleared the pattern because yeah, I wasn't too fond of it. So I'll just record again. So what I'm doing is I'm just messing around with the envelope. So yeah, messing around with the envelope is just yeah. So I'll show you when I hit a key. You can hear that the sound is kind of dragging along. Yeah, and I can just drag that along. So yeah, I have the release and the sustain up really high, so the sound is just gonna drag and drag and drag. And then if I reduce the release and the sustain, it's just a very short sound. So I'll start recording in this side. Let's see. So yeah, what I've done here is I've recorded in session view, and I'll just play over it. So I didn't really like the first, the first part I wasn't really a fan of. What I'll do is I'll just have this starting over at this point. Okay. So it sounds like there's... Yeah, it's not starting completely at the part where I'd like it to start. But that shouldn't be an issue. So I can just grab this here and bring it here. And yeah, I'll just bring in an EQ because I can hear the low end. So I'll bring in this EQ8. My best friend. So let's go. Yeah, so it shouldn't really be about how the EQ looks. It's more so about how things sound. So yeah, I can literally hear like a lot of low end here, which isn't needed. But you can see here on this part on the left hand side that yeah, there's quite a lot of with the way this sound is, there's quite a lot of low end here, which is unnecessary. So I'll just do a sharp cut off here, and then I'll bring it to like 100. Yeah, that sounds a little bit like, you know, something I'd like to have. Okay, so there's a little bit here, which towards this side, which I didn't really like the sound of. So I'll just cut this off here. Yeah, and with these sounds, you know, there's a different, like, if you're not, for me, it's like if I'm not really happy with how something I recorded sounds, I can either just try recording it again manually, or, you know, as I did, I can grab, I can put a warp marker here, and then I can move it around. If I feel it starts a little bit too late, I'll, bring it a bit forward. And then also another thing, which you can do is, I can just grab this much, I can highlight this much, and yeah, you can go to quantize settings, and you can quantize, to whatever percentage you'd like. If you want 100%, or if you want, we'll just say 70%. You can go which makes it sound a little bit nicer. But the issue with, this sort of quantization is, if you start quantizing like this too much in a track, with lots of different sound elements, the track then will sound a little bit too static. So yeah, what I try to do is I try have little bits of variation. So sometimes I generally tend to just try record again, and then if I get fed up, I'll just I'll put in I'll quantize it to a certain amount. But yeah, I'll just I'll leave this quantized because I'm just conscious of time. And then another thing we can do is add in, like, let's say for dub sounds, delays and reverbs are really nice to mess around with. So I'll just drop in, drop in a delay, and then I'll reduce the time, reduce the dry wet. So this sound, to me it sounds a little bit quite static. And then, another thing that can be done is I'll grab a LFO. So another thing that can be done is tying an LFO, low frequency oscillator, to certain sounds. And you can also tie it to, pretty much anything. So you'll see now, I can tie this to this part of the frequency here, this little node here, and it's gonna go. I'm just doing this for the purpose of demonstration, not so much, for how it sounds. So this is gonna sound a little bit extreme when the when this LFO is attached. So if I click here, and then click this part. Okay, so it should work. Okay, so this should work. Okay, so this isn't working. Just give me 1 sec. Yeah, so what this LFO is doing, it's basically just, moving the, this high cutoff rapidly, and then I can also slow down the rate. So, yeah, I really love messing around with, dub samples and dub kind of stabs and chords. Because as soon as you add like reverb or delay or any sort of effect, it just really transforms the sound and it makes it sound a lot more interesting. And it's quite a really simple. It's quite like a simple technique. When it comes to production, but it's quite effective. And then so I'll leave this in, and then I'll record another dub sound. Okay, so I'll look for a sound. I'll just use the same sound, but I'll go a couple of octaves down. I can't remember which note I used, but let's give it a go. I'll solo this just so I can hear what I'm doing. I like the sound of this, but I don't really like the movement in it, because we already have some movement on the previous dub sound which we recorded. So I'd like this to sound a little bit more, just a little bit more kind of fluid without too much movement. So I'm just going to mess around with and tweak the sound a bit. So let's start recording. Okay, so let's see what this sounds like. Oh yeah, another thing is with this synth, there was two ways of recording there. So I recorded this part up here, but yeah, you can also just like record into the synthesizer and then just have the recording being played over, which is something I sometimes use as well. If I feel like, oh, you know, I'd like this sound to kind of like have certain changes or whatever, I just keep playing the MIDI over and over, and as the track is repeating, I just kind of tweak it from there. But yeah, the danger with that is, you know, like you can find a sound, you know, that sounds nice, and then what will happen is if I, you know, keep tweaking the sound, then I'll kind of lose the patch then, and then I won't be able to go back. But yeah, lucky enough, yeah, we recorded this much, so we'll work with this. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, normally, yeah, if I was making this track at home, I'd probably spend a lot longer, kind of tweaking this sound. I'd probably select, yeah, the first. I feel like this much sounds good. The first couple of times this sound comes in, sounds good, but towards the end, yeah, I could lose this bit. And the great thing about combining hardware with Ableton is, yeah, you can find the sound and then, yeah, have a jam along with what I recorded and then record it in. And then later on, you know, there's so much tweaking that I can do to this sound. A lot of the parameters, you know, a lot of the options that you have in the audio effects in Ableton, you know, sometimes you might find them already, you know, in the synthesizers, like in this synth, you know, there is delay and there is reverb. So yeah. That's some chorus. Yeah, so there's effects which you can put on the synthesizer, but generally I like to, you know, just record the sound in raw and try not to, yeah, add too much. Yeah, I try not to mess around with the sound too much, because at least once I've recorded this much in, I can now change it on Ableton. So yeah, you can really mess around with this. I'll just do Command Shift and T. So I'll do Command Shift T, and then I could actually, yeah, sample this further. No, I don't like that. I generally like the simpler. Yeah, I'll use this. And then I'll just shut this one off. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Then I'll zoom in here just so I know where it starts. So this blue arrow here Where you see this like fuzzy line, that's the audio, the beginning of where I recorded. And so let's just do something random. Yeah, so here, you know, I could add in, I could add in like so many different audio effects here. Let's try add some saturation. Yeah, I'll add in like a tiny bit of saturation. You could also add in an arpeggiator. Yeah, this is one of the reasons I love, Ableton. There's just like so much you can do. I think this sounds a bit random, but it'll sound better when the clap comes in. And then I can mess around with this. The simpler it has a you can mess around with the frequency, the resonance. But then I could also have one note going a little bit higher. So we'll go fifth note maybe. And then I'll just duplicate this, so I'll go across and I'll duplicate. And then I might, and I'll make this one I'll make this last note a tiny bit shorter. And I might add in another one. This is one thing I love about Ableton. You can really get lost in it and just mess around. And then I could add in like a reverb. This is why, it's like really easy working with dub sounds. And then also generally like a G note works, like G and D notes work really well for dub sounds. So sometimes I could like even like make my own my own patches with dub sounds or with any other sound. So I'll add in some reverb. Actually, I'll use a VST. So I wasn't really that into VSTs until I think about like 3-4 years ago. I was always aware of them, but I just was never really that into them. But when I got the Fab filter, I really like this one, and then now I've started adding in more usage of VSTs into my production. Okay, so we'll go for this one, Fab filter. Oh yeah, then we have our sound from earlier somewhere. Oh yeah, that's been playing the whole time. Okay. And then if I was to record this in arrangement view, I'll actually just drag it over. Okay. So drag it in here. So with the automation, one thing I really like in Ableton is just having like a lot of control in terms of picking out like different specific sounds and different specific points, where I can really just create a certain what's the best way to explain it in words? You can just create a lot of variation in the sound. So this sound is the same thing over and over again. I'm not sure what. Okay, so with this part, I'll just mess around with I'll double click here, and then I can mess around with the frequency. So you'll hear this sound kind of gradually coming in. Yeah, and then also another thing is, this you have an option for different like types of graphs which you can use. There's a really cool video somewhere on YouTube. Basically, it shows how volume kind of increasing and decreasing for human ears, our hearing is logarithmic. So if you have like, let's say a straight line like this, I'm not sure what way it's set in Ableton, but if you have a straight line like this, for our human ears, we're not really going to be able to hear much up until a certain point, because it's like, as I said, our hearing's logarithmic. So you'll hear the sound creeping in. But it creeped in quite slowly, so you have an option of different types of these shapes you can use. So the best shape to use is a curve. So I'll just grab this. So the best shape to use is this one. Because this is suits our hearing style. And then we'll see how this sounds. Yeah, so this sounds a lot better. But if I was using a more kind of primitive software, you'd be able to hear it a lot better. But if sound comes in and like the shape of it comes in and it's like straight, you're going to hear a tiny bit of the sound, and then it's going to get loud really fast. So the way our ears work is, if there's a curve, that's logarithmic. So then that means we'll hear it much more gradually. Yeah. So yeah, with parameters in music, there's like so many like different little things you can use to kind of bring in intensities and take away intensities. Yeah, and one thing which yeah, I love about yeah, producing and being a producer is that, you know, I'm always kind of learning new things. Yeah, I'm always learning new things. And if I collaborate with somebody, you know, they might teach me something and I could teach them something. Yeah, so yeah, like one thing I like is, you know, there's so much depth to music, but then also at the same time, it's not good to kind of get too sucked into, you know, yeah, the technical aspect. Sometimes it's good just to kind of like, you know, just go to the studio and have a jam and not really care about like, you know, the expectations of, you know, whoever I'm sending the music is, what they're going to think. Obviously, I do bear that in mind when I make music. But yeah, it's also good to kind of like just not stick too much to the kind of like, you know, the, I don't know, the physics or the sound engineering part. But yeah, so yeah, we've pretty much now, I'm satisfied enough with, yeah, these two dub samples. I'll delete this and we'll go back to yeah, and as I said before, generally I like to mess around with the, yeah, the filter in particular, or sometimes like the decay, as a track kind of got like, I like to introduce sounds gradually or sometimes abruptly, and then as a track is going out, then it's really nice to be able to use a filter. I'll go to the end of this track. So yeah, if this track was ending, you could kind of randomly bring up the filter, and then you can bring it down. You know, you have a lot of options of what you can use parameter-wise or what you can select. You know, I could have used the volume, for example. You know, some people might prefer to use the volume. Yeah, if you're bringing out like, or letting the track kind of like die down, or letting the track kind of yeah, yeah, finish off. You can use you can select different parameters you can use to take away sounds. But yeah, the filter is a nice one to use. Yeah, or else, you know, you can kind of just go back to tweaking, let's say the gate. So I'll tweak the gate on the arpeggiator. Yeah, so there are lots of like little things that you can do, right? Lots of little things I use in my tracks, which yeah, bring varying kind of like intensities and yeah, emotions as I'm listening to the track. But yeah, so that's that track. yeah, which I made. This track I made, I actually made it like I flew home to Dublin a year ago for Christmas, and ended up like getting COVID, and I had to be there for like 3 weeks. So yeah, I was just in bed in my old bedroom, and my parents just kind of like on my laptop, and yeah, I was able to like pick up some samples, and then there's actually yeah, this 808 snare sound. 808 snare too. I think this one, I made my own sample pack actually. There's a nice studio in this building on the back part, and yeah, one of my friends was working here like a year and a half ago, and I was lucky enough that like, yeah, my friend invited me in, and I just like made my own sample pack. So where is it? I'll just have a look. Let me type in worm. Let's have a look. Oh yeah. So yeah, there's an 808. I don't know if it's still there, but there's a lot of really nice like drum machines and stuff. So I just recorded different things from the 808, and yeah. These can then be used in productions. Oh yeah, here we go. Worm Studio samples 808. And then I recorded some other synthesizers as well. There's a 303 back there. These are going to be pretty loud, so I might turn this down a bit. I'll have to remember what level I'm turning it down by. Okay. Yeah, so these are just like random, I was just kind of like banging away at different synthesizers, and these are random things I used. But because I made the sample pack myself, and at the time I made the EP, my plan was to start recording a little bit before Christmas, but then I flew home, and then I was only supposed to be home for a couple of days, and then I ended up having to be home for a couple of weeks. So I was just stayed in bed using sample packs, which I made, which is a really nice thing about Ableton. And then when I came back, I'd sent like small demos to the label, just like 1 minute long tracks. And then when I got back to my studio here in Rotterdam, I just beefed up the track basically, and all the tracks ended up sounding different. But it was really nice the way I was able to make like the kind of backbone of the tracks at home, and then as soon as I got better again, came here, and then I was able to just hook this up, and it was like hooked up with my the rest of my studio at home. So that's one really nice thing about Ableton, the way you can kind of once you have your laptop with you, you can kind of make music anywhere, and then later on, then you can add in things, or you can take away things. So or you can use an old sample pack, and you can really kind of like combine sound sources from lots of different lots of different places, whether it's a drum machine, synthesizer, or VST. It doesn't really matter. That's one really nice thing with producing using a digital audio workstation. But that's that track.
Thank you, Ngoni.
No worries.
It was really, really nice hearing you talk about the track, and you seem to know a lot about not only music production, but also the human perception of listening to music, about what we are perceiving, the amount of hertz and stuff. You also said something about with dub tracks, the chords G and D, I believe, work really well. Why is that?
I have no idea. It just sounds really good. I'll have a look now. Let's. I'll solo this. And here. so C, D. So this is a D. And then, yeah, generally, like, if whatever notes will match with this, will sound nice. G, C. So this is a D. Yeah, so,
And do you know your music skills, or did you just practice and do what feels right?
I kind of mixed it up a little bit. Initially, when I started learning how to produce, it was just by myself. My mom had got this, me and my sister, this CD. It was like some Disney CD, and it was like a music production thing. And this was like a long time ago. It was one, back when people had those big old Windows computers. So yeah, I just started like making music when I was a teenager using that, and then later on started using like softwares. But when I started taking music production seriously about like 10 years ago, I did piano lessons for a while, but I didn't really learn, I kind of learned like the basics, but I didn't really learn too much about chord progression or anything outside of that. Then I studied sound engineering and music production as well for 1 year in Dublin. That was like 8 years ago. And yeah, so I picked up a few little bits, but one thing I don't like is when it comes to music theory, sometimes people kind of get a bit too stuck. Sometimes I feel like, if I feel like, oh yeah, I want to use like, the correct notes in a track and I don't want to get the notes wrong, it kind of takes the fun away from it. Because then it kind of feels like, I don't know, an assignment.
Aesthetic.
Yeah, it feels like I've been given like an assignment, and it's like, oh, follow these rules, and that only works. Whereas, yeah, that's not true with music. You can kind of, you can hit the wrong notes, and then sometimes it sounds nice. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
So, are there any other questions from the audience? I see 1, 2, 3 hands up.
Thank you. Do you do your own mixage when your track is finished?
Yeah, I have done my own mixes, but yeah, I just try leave it to the sound engineer. If I'm sending music to a label, if I'm making music with friends and it's a track that I'd like to just play out in a club, I'll just master it myself, or I can just send it to a friend to master. But usually, when it comes to labels, I just leave like -12 dB. They say -6 is usually safe, but I always like leave -12. Sometimes like, yeah, sometimes more. Yeah, anything from like -6 around -12 dB. That kind of leaves headroom for a sound engineer to work with it. But I know that like when it comes to like music production as a producer and sound engineering, they're two very different things. And yeah, like with sound engineering, it takes like a long time for people to really kind of like understand it and get a good grasp of it. Yeah, so for me, I've tried to learn as much as I can so far about sound engineering, but at the same time, like I know I'm a producer, so I always feel like way more comfortable leaving it to an actual sound engineer to do that. But yeah, the best thing I do is just like leave some headroom for the sound engineer, and then yeah,
cool.
They
Thank
take care
you.
of it. Cool.
I still have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you have a certain moment when you're making a track when you feel it's done, it's finished? Or does it vary?
Yeah, it varies a lot of the time. It really varies. Yeah, it really varies because sometimes I could have everything done in session view, and I could be playing everything in session view, and it sounds okay as a loop, and then later on, then when I try going to arrangement, it's just it can really suck because then it's just like I'm trying to bring the track to life, and it just doesn't really work. So yeah, it depends really. If I'm happy with how I arrange the track, yeah, then I'll be like, oh, okay, this is ready to send off to a label. But usually a lot of the time it's like I just keep on changing things, and then sometimes what happens with sending music to record labels is I could send a track, I could like how a track sounds, and then somebody from a record label would be like, oh, it sounds a bit too clean, can you make it sound a bit more rough, did you do too much EQing? And then I'd be conscious like, oh yeah, I really like EQing, and then I'd realize, oh yeah, I did do a lot of EQing there, and then because I'm sending it to a label, I just change it up a little bit, and then I'd send it back, and sometimes I send tracks back and forward. But then other times you could send the same track to somebody else in a different label, and they could say, "Oh, I love how it sounds so clean," and so it's kind of like sometimes it's to do with what way a label wants it. And then also sometimes there's labels that they're just happy with the way it is. So it really depends. Like I do have a personal moment where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm confident enough to send this out. But then whatever way it's received by the person who's putting the effort into releasing it, sometimes they might ask me to change things, and I kind of depending on how comfortable I feel with that, I can change sometimes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.
Thank you.
Hey, I was wondering, I see you've also been using groups. Do you use any effects on the groups or something to make it glue together? Or
Yeah, I do. So here, I just use like a filter. So I'll show you at the beginning of the track. You see this filter coming in. So I'll bring out the percussion. And then you can see this is generally I like to work, I really like to work in groups. So I have like my percussion here, my synth sounds here, and then it just kind of working in these sort of blocks makes, it makes things just a little bit easier to comprehend, because sometimes if there's lots of MIDI channels and audio channels, it's kind of difficult to know where's what. So generally I like to label things like this. On this one, on the dub, I have the dub sounds. I just have a saturator, and then here I added in an auto filter, but then I disabled it. So you'll see what happens at this part to the beat. So you'll see it's off now, and then you'll see it's being turned on, and then you'll hear that the beat is kind of the beat is just going away. Okay, let's go back to this part. We'll go back to here, and you'll see that the filter is off here, and then using the you'll see it's turning on, and all the percussion is just being filtered out slowly. And in the original track, there's just like a dub sound which gets more and more and more intense and more intense, and then at a certain point the sound releases, and then the rest of the percussion releases now. So sometimes it's nice to use groups, and then it's also nice to use a filter in a group to gradually just like bring something out and then bring something back in. And then there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. You can get like, let's say, a beat repeater, an arpeggiator, and you can really just like mess with a whole group of sounds. So
cool, thanks.
Cheers.
Was there another question or no? Okay.
No other questions? Okay.
I thought, but
Then you got a question?
no.
No? Okay, I got a question. So we had two tracks, quite different tracks. Like one was more electro, the other one was more of a techno, dubby kind of vibe. What is for your music production, and what type of track you want to make? What is like essential? What needs to be in a track? What that makes it a finished track? Also, what he said, but a finished track that you can be proud of.
What it has to have in it. It's more so like if I feel satisfied that the track feels full enough, like there's enough sound elements and it sounds like interesting enough, and there's enough variation in the sound. That's when I kind of feel really satisfied. But sometimes I can have tracks just kind of like sitting in like in arrangement view for a long time, and I can be like arranging the track different ways. But it's usually generally like one thing that I feel with a lot of my different productions is just like having some variety of sounds in the track, and then once the sounds kind of gel together, okay, then to my ears, when I feel like they gel together, okay, that's kind of that's kind of when I know, yeah, the track has
when it feels good.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got one more question. Something that I saw. You don't use any sidechain or compression, or it seems as you don't use it. Is that a conscious reason behind it, or?
It depends on the track. So sometimes with this track, there's actually like no real bass line in it. Yeah, there's no real bass line in it. Generally, when I do use side chaining, I would generally side chain, yeah, the bass to the kick. Or like a lot of the time I would side chain, let's say, synth pad sound, like in the track which I showed you, the first track which I showed you, that was produced, yeah, a couple of years back. So at the time I wasn't really, you know, I was conscious of side chaining, but I wasn't really using side chaining like effectively. Whereas like now, normally what I'd do is just like I'd side chain maybe like a synth line to the kick, or I'd side chain certain things if I want, like, you know, the kick to keep on having its boom. Yeah, I'd side chain things to the kick.
And compression?
Yeah, well, I generally use a compressor. Yeah, I just use like side chain compression. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
Okay. Then I think we're gonna finish up. Are there any plans for you in the future? What do you have any releases planned, or are you playing somewhere that we can check you out?
Yeah, so release-wise, I have one release which should be out soon. It's a compilation on a label which is actually Rotterdam-based label. So yeah, I can't, I don't want to say just yet.
Keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Keep it a secret, you know.
Yeah, and then yeah, so that's, yeah, production. DJing-wise, I'm DJing at Orbit Festival in Utrecht in the summer. And also, I'm doing a live set at Down the Rabbit Hole Festival, which I'm really looking forward to, and I'm hoping just to do more live sets. Yeah, I didn't do a live set for a long time through the pandemic. I was just kind of like jamming at home, and then I think it was at the beginning of the year I had yeah, my first live set in 3 years was in Berghain like 2 months ago. Which was, yeah, that was nice. And then I was really kind of inspired after that to, yeah, just keep doing live shows. So that's kind of one thing I'm looking forward to. Yeah, more live shows. And then, yeah, just finishing off more tracks and working on more EPs. Yeah.
Keep moving forward.
Exactly, yeah,
Nice.
that's it, yeah.
Great to hear, and looking forward to it. So yeah, thank you, Ngoni, for all these helpful tips and tricks, and showing us your workflow and everything in it. Yeah, this was Footprints by Operator Radio. Thank you for having us. Thank you for coming out, and see you at the next edition. You know how it goes. YouTube, Facebook, Operator. Let's go to the next one.
Cheers, thanks a lot.